Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Since I spoke to you about 24 hours ago, I hope life has treated you well. Firstly, before anything and anything FPL related in particular, I would just like to say thank you. We surpassed 4,000 subscribers in a very, very quick time, considering how many videos have been uploaded and just especially how long it's been. So for that, I am very grateful. Thank you very much for your support. And now we look to build to, I guess, the first big number after 1,000, which is 5,000. Now, this is being recorded after the EFL Cup game, so we've got some information there that I can sprinkle into this team selection video as things play out and as we learn things from the press conference and the aftermath of the EFL Cup on Thursday, which is when you'll be watching this. I can then add that into the solving your problems video, which should be very important this week with so many injuries popping up. This video will have two new things compared to the old team selections. One is a transfer plans, but a thought dump version, because there's just a lot of things up in the air. And I'll also be looking at the medium and long-term prospects of my players, as opposed to the short-term, which is mainly what we do in team selection videos, because the wildcard could be any time from game week 10, which is now, till game week 19. So without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into it. We shall start, as always, with Sels Supremacy, but I've also included the bench because they never get any limelight, and this time there has to be a little discussion because I've swapped Winks and Hall in terms of the bench order. I get questions on that sometimes for people who have been copying my team very closely. So I thought I would just show you that and make the change on screen. Now, with Sels, it's really interesting because West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, and then obviously it's Arsenal away, but then Ipswich at home is quite nice. After that, it goes like City, Villa, United, and that's not the easiest set of games, especially City. And if we discount that fixture because it's obviously bad, the other two are ones where you can see him getting a haul. At least those are going to be two games where the opposition will certainly have a high shot volume. And if Forest can limit them to low to mid-level XG shots, relatively speaking, and he can have a good game, which he'll need to probably save one or two big chances, there's a big haul on offer. And it almost makes it worth it just to keep him for that and potentially capture some upside on the assumption that he's still playing well beforehand and we've generated points. Because if we're not getting points from West Ham at home, Newcastle at home, and Ipswich at home, if none of them, then they're probably not in the best defensive form. And it's probably going to be very, very, very unlikely to capture a clean sheet against those two sides. If it's somewhat likely, I'll be happy to keep. The reason I bring this up is because maybe I'll play the wildcard and I get rid of him, right? So I thought I would assess his prospects there for those considering bringing him in, or those on a wildcard, or those just uncertain about him. I thought I'd touch on that. And now we can move on to the defense, which is in a very interesting state. Right, now before I talk about the rest of the team, let me just discuss my shift in perspective on strategy and also how I viewed my team this week. Sunday, I wasn't exactly best pleased with it, right? And that's probably had a little bit to do with specifically Cole Palmer's performance. And I wasn't overly excited with the prospect of not owning him again, and the fact that I think Everton was so poor against Fulham. But obviously, since then, time's gone by, and I realised that they probably won't perform as badly at Southampton, and it's a much better fixture anyway. So in general, I was very, very, very comfortable rolling, especially once I had looked at it. However, now I've seen that Guardiola is getting some treatment after the Spurs game on the pitch, which isn't the greatest sign in the world. Ake is also back and he's fit, which means that do they really need to take a risk with him when there's no De Bruyne? Savinho just went off on a stretcher, which we're going to talk about. Akanji got injured in the warm-up. Does he really need to take more risks? Probably not. It's also not a bad game to play Ake, so you can clamp down Semenyo to the best of your ability. Obviously, Guardiola is an exceptional defender. You've got a very able understudy, whereby you're not going to get exploited there too much. So, on the assumption he's not close to being 100% fit, there's a chance that he misses out, which would be a big blow. Gabriel, whilst I expressed in the Everything You Need to Know video, it's my personal opinion he's going to play. Maybe if I have him and Guardiola, who are both maybe 50-50, it's quite big going into the game week. Not only because they're two defender spots or two spots in the team, but they're also premiums within their category. So to lose them is quite a big deal. And on top of that, Conte has not exactly got the best fixture, right? He's probably the worst asset in the side this week. I am quietly confident of Villa potentially getting a clean sheet there. But obviously, in terms of the prospects from an objective perspective, it's not great. So one, I was actually quite looking forward to fielding this defense because I thought, you know what, Arsenal away, very defensive minded. You can get something there. Vardio was just a machine, and I had a good feeling about Conte. Now, not so much with the injury news, but let's see how it develops, and we can always reassess in the Solving Your Problems video. But on the assumption that they're fit, I'm relatively happy. I did say I would speak about their long-term prospects. Conte in 12, in 14 and 15 in 3 good home games, all rated 2 on the FTO. As we know, that can't really be taken at face value, but nonetheless, it's a decent set of fixtures for him. Vardiol, see, the fixtures don't look great. Like Bournemouth away, good transitional threat, and their high press isn't the easiest thing in the world to deal with, and they're just generally very good at home. Brighton away, they've always got goals in them. Spurs, good attack. Liverpool, third best team in the league. So clean sheets wise, it doesn't look great for him. But as I've expressed, in the harder games, he tends to play the more attacking role out of the fullbacks. Or at least he has more attacking responsibility. And it's not like City can't keep a clean sheet against pretty much anyone. Even against Arsenal last year, for example, they grinded out a 0-0 draw. They nearly kept a clean sheet at the Emirates as well in quite a cagey affair. Obviously, Spurs, Bournemouth, Brighton present you with completely different games, but nonetheless, they have shown the capability to keep a clean sheet against pretty much anyone. And why wouldn't they, right? They're the best team in the world. So I think there's still an opportunity there, and I'm very comfortable holding him, knowing the attacking upside he has. And the other thing is the defender theory that I've spoken about. In general, there's not going to be too many clean sheets. So when you have a guy who's playing for City's defense and is a phenomenon in terms of his attacking capabilities, small space ability, and ball striking in particular, you would lean towards keeping him. Gabriel, I see he's pretty similar. Maybe, obviously, open play threat isn't there, but set threat from set pieces and his box threat is immense. And Arsenal seem to just have so many different solutions for set pieces, and the quality of delivery from both sides, specifically with Rice and Saka, is magnificent. Then the other thing is the fixtures actually from 12 are pretty good from a defensive standpoint, relatively speaking, compared to what you could have. So again, someone I'm looking to hold, and it would be my preference to hold. And I don't really have concerns over those two, nor Konsa, considering his run in 12 and beyond. Now let's move on to the midfield. I am hoping that Dwight McNeil is fit, because if he's not, one, it's a big blow to the ECL in terms of the creativity inside. And it's a spot where I don't really have a replacement. Okay, fine. I have a Winks at home to Ipswich, but I don't even know if he's going to start. And in general, it's hardly the most, not exactly a tantalizing prospect, is it? If he is injured, let's just say he's injured, and Gabriel's not there, and Guardiola's not there, then it becomes a really interesting spot. Because yeah, sure, I have one free transfer, and I could play Winks, but then is it potentially the time to pull the wildcard trigger, given City may be in a little bit of trouble, which we'll come on to. McNeil, I'm sure we'll get an update. Personally, again, I think he's going to be fine. I think Vardiol, I think Gabriel, and I think McNeil will be fine. But it's never the best situation to be in. Rodgers, I think now he's become a little bit underrated, following just one substitution. He was the only guy out of the front 4, 5, 6 to play 90 minutes in the Champions League games for Bournemouth. So it makes sense that he got subbed early, especially when he wanted to form a Watkins and Duran partnership as it wasn't working. So I think going forward, especially with the run from 12, the value you've got accumulated in him, the position he's playing, the expected minutes, how much his manager loves him, really, really easy hold in a lot of structures which aren't, let's say, optimum. Because for a lot of optimal teams in 12, for example, they don't have Holland, and therefore they don't really want Rodgers as well, which I understand. Some do, some don't. Some just want like 4 premiums in Salah, Saka, Son, Palmer, and then Mbeumo, and just basically the most stacked midfield you could have. And they wouldn't have Rodgers. But for me, I still think he holds brilliant value. And just cast your mind back a few weeks ago, 2 assists against Wolves, a goal against Ipswich, and another return in a game prior. So very, very comfortable holding him. Who do we go to? Foden, Salah, Foden, Salah. Salah is what I deem to be the closest player to essential in the game as of now, because he's operating from such a low volume of instances compared to what I guess he has done in the past, and he's still putting up these numbers, which is a bit of a joke. And you expect him to probably keep doing that. And then I think as Liverpool become better and better and more used to slot football, and he has a better idea of everything, because it's still early stages, right? Like, as has been shown many a time, including with Pep Guardiola, sometimes it takes a while to integrate their system, their philosophy, and to get it all ticking. And I think when it does, and it hasn't done so yet to even close to the best extent, Salah will get a higher volume of instances where he's likely to generate output, and he's finds himself in more and more isolated and profitable situations in terms of FPL. We'll talk about captaincy at the end, as we always do. Now, Foden becomes a very, very interesting one following tonight's event. Savinho is now injured, and he went off on a stretch, and I wish him the best. He was City's main creative, and he was performing in terms of creative capacity at a far superior level compared to any of them. In fact, all of them combined didn't even reach his level, especially because De Bruyne is not there, right? So now City have no creative. Bournemouth do offer you a game where it can be heavily transition-based. Brighton do that as well. Spurs do that as well. So maybe with these games, you're not getting a low block and it's not the end of the world. But it's still not great in terms of their prospects for scoring goals. I do, however, think that now a lot of attacking responsibility has to be shifted to Foden and Haaland, because as well as Nunez has been playing, he's not that type of player. He's not a left winger. And Bernardo, a right wing, especially for me in recent times, has not been particularly effective from an attacking standpoint. So while City look worse overall, certainly on paper, I do think that will translate to Foden and Haaland having such dominion over output and over those output generating opportunities in general. So I think you'll see City suffer in terms of their attacking quality, but it could just mean that Foden and Haaland have to repeatedly get them over the line. And in terms of attacking returns, at least for this guy, at his price, it may actually work in his favor somehow. Right, this is the transfers thought dump slide, and this is the second new thing in this video. I thought I had to do something a little bit different, because instead of showing you my preferred route in 11 or 12, there's just so much to talk about, and I thought this would just be a better way to present it to yourself. Right, number one, and most importantly, in my opinion, Cole Palmer in game week 12. And to be honest, I wasn't even thinking about making any transfers until the stuff in the EFL Cup happened, and until someone put a seed of doubt in my mind when I saw, is McNeil going to be back on the weekend, etc., right? So my thoughts have slightly changed since the production of this slide. But what is most important is the route to Cole Palmer in game week 12. Selling Phil Foden is almost an absolute, because how else am I going to get that? Am I selling Salah? Absolutely not. Am I going to have the cash to fund Rodgers, Winks, or I should know the other player on my team? I should definitely know the other, or McNeil. I'm going to keep that in there. Or McNeil to Palmer. Well, I can if I sell Haaland. However, I'm not actually overly bullish on selling Haaland, because I still think that he can do some damage, right? And I think it's not really going to get any much worse than it's been at the moment, and it should be a bit better. All three fixtures are stylistically good for him as well: Bournemouth, Brighton, and Spurs. And then maybe I'll sell him in 14, right? Which is where I'm looking at potentially wildcarding, as you see in the bottom line. So Foden will go. And then what is the route to Cole Palmer? Well, I could sell Guardiola, okay, because it would be what? Spurs and Liverpool and Forest, which is not the greatest set of fixtures, at least for his clean sheet likelihood, or just generally. I could sell Kai Havertz and move him down to like one of the cheaper forwards. However, in doing so, I have to consider whether I am selling DCL. And this is why I would just really like Dominic Calvert-Lewin to score this week, or even return, or just play well. Because if he does, I can hold him happily for West Ham and Brentford, which are two very good fixtures from an attacking standpoint. It would save me having to spend 0.6 million on him to Cunha next week, and I would just forego Cunha in game week 10. And you know what? So be it. I'm game week 11. I'm okay with that. Maybe I'll sell Havertz and have Cunha and DCL, and then use the money to upgrade Palmer easily, upgrade Foden to Palmer easily in game week 12. But ideally, if I have to use the transfer to go DCL to Cunha because he fails again, then my route becomes a lot more difficult, and then I think selling Haaland becomes more viable, because in the selling of Havertz, I would have to go to a forward that's not a Cunha, on the assumption that I have to move DCL to Cunha. I can't sell him to like anyone who's like 6'1" and above, which means I pretty much have to go Jimenez or Vista. I don't really want to go with either of those, as good as Vista has been. I'll be more comfortable going there, I think, but still, I don't really want to go there. I'd rather have a bit more money invested there. And if I make that move and take that 0.6 out of my budget, I will, when selling Guardiola to fund Foden to Palmer, will essentially be at like a price point of 4.2, 4.3. And okay, if Mikalenka still exists, great, but the fixtures aren't even that good from that point. So do I really want him? No. So that's that. I'm kind of needing DCL to come good, and I hope he does. I obviously spoke about my preference to actually keep Haaland, because I think you can have a draft with Haaland, Salah, and Palmer, and it would still be very strong. Havertz looks good from 12. I'm kind of just hoping he finds some form again. It's not really his fault. He hasn't had very ideal conditions in the last two, albeit he was kind of close to a return against Liverpool, so he should tick along. I'm not too concerned there. Like I said, ideally a lot rests on DCL, and a lot of the plans will form themselves from his production this week, but also just the general team. Because let's say they do very poorly again, maybe I look at wildcard 11. Maybe I book in wildcard 12. But if it goes to plan and I don't have to wildcard in 12, because this is my preference. My preference is not to wildcard in 12. I think I can put a strong enough team out on the assumption that DCL plays well enough, in game weeks 10 and 11, a very strong team in 10 and 11, and then have 3 free transfers in 12 to exploit the upside. I can go Foden to Palmer, I'll downgrade Vardiol, and then I'll still have a transfer spare. Like I mentioned, Conte's fixture turn pretty good. So maybe I'll move DCL on to someone who I can afford, if that is a possibility. Someone maybe who's like 0. Instead of Cunha's price point, someone who's a little bit cheaper, but there's not too many that exist. That is the plan. To hold DCL for like 3-4 weeks, get to 14, and then I can reassess. And if I want to wildcard there, I can, because no one's going to have Bowen, and it's going to be very difficult for people to get him. No one's going to have Isak. No one's going to have Watkins. And I would like those assets. I would really, really like those assets. The other thing, by the way, that I hadn't spoken about is I could go Vardiol and Havertz and downgrade them both with 3 free transfers in 12, upgrade Foden, and then just go something like Havertz to Jackson, which is fun, like 0.2, 0.3, which allows me to, instead of having a 4.3 asset, have a 4.6 asset in defense, and then I can get someone like Aït-Nouri. So that is the other plan. But Wildcard 14 is something I'm looking at. I think it's slightly underrated in terms of the fixture swing, and especially when the main player that I'd like, Palmer, is accessible to myself. I've already got Arsenal assets there, 2 of them. And the other thing is, if I've got Haaland, I'm not too bothered about not having Saka because I can't own all of them, right? So yeah, like I said, that was literally a thought dump. Not particularly structured, but that wasn't really the purpose of it. It was just for you to understand my thoughts. And I'd love to actually hear what you would do on my team. Plan it for me for a few weeks if you wouldn't mind, and just tell me what you think, because one thing I use models for more than anything else is idea generation, and using the comment section for that would be absolutely brilliant. Let's start with Havertz now that we've returned to the forward section. His prospect is open to interpretation this week. There's a school of thought where Arsenal's defensive philosophy and Arteta's defensive philosophy will manifest, therefore they won't have too many opportunities outside of transition, and they have some creative issues at the moment. So that's one school of thought. On the other hand, Newcastle are very susceptible to an athletic striker in behind. On the other hand, they have probably the greatest creative right winger in the world, or at least a top 3 right winger in terms of their creative capacities. With the way Saka's playing at the moment, he's been untouchable in that facet this season. And that in itself is enough for Havertz to prosper and thrive, especially given Newcastle are unlikely to submit to Arsenal's superiority, I would say, like they did to City. So I think his prospects here could actually be quite good if they have a good day, but if they don't, then they're very bad. I think high ceiling, low floor. The only thing with his high ceiling is finishing needs to be there. They need to be a little bit more ruthless in front of goal, Arsenal. I've been waiting to see that specifically from him more so than anyone else. If he gets that, oh my God, what a monster asset, right? If Arsenal can just get the creativity to tick and he can just get in a finishing streak, man, he will be top value for what you're paying, even though you're paying quite a bit. But like I said, high prospects in terms of the ceiling, low prospects in terms of the floor. Haaland, again, this is open for interpretation. I definitely see Bournemouth centre-backs being susceptible to that space and behind that they leave, and no one's better to exploit it. There'll be a threat on transition City, but so will Bournemouth. And then the other thing is, you don't have the Savinho threat in transition now. Instead, you probably have Bernardo Silva on the right wing, which is a completely different variable and definitely worse for Haaland. You also don't have his creative capacity, and you don't really have a creative in the side. So could City turn out to be quite sluggish and just really try and slow the game down and make it a game of few moments where they prosper and just try and control the amount of transitions that Bournemouth have more so than they do usually compared to other teams? Yes, they could definitely do that. Could City also just be ruthless in the opportunities that they get and engage in or Bournemouth force a more aggressive game, a more open game, a more transition-based game, a more basketball-style game, and could Haaland absolutely rip them as a result? Yeah, he could. So there's a lot of little things to try and interpret here. Overall, it's very, 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 very difficult, near impossible to say what is actually going to happen with 100% conviction. I don't even think Pep could tell you that, right? Because there are so many variables to consider, and how's anyone meant to know exactly how it's going to play out as a result of so many unknowns? However, I do think I probably have him slightly higher than most people do. I think Calvert-Lewin, look, I think Southampton are a better side than people say they are. I think they have certainly got more talent than people say they do. But it's Southampton away at the end of the day. It's still a top 3 fixture. If he's going to fail here, then you know what? So be it. But I have to give him, I have to give him it. And in terms of the team, that's about it. Now, let's go and see whether the close captaincy call has landed. Now, firstly, I will say this is subject to change, okay? Because it is very close. And I spoke about how I'm slightly higher on Haaland than most people. The other thing is, and I have not watched the highlights from the game, so I don't know, but I will do so before solving your problems, that Brighton employed a 6-3-1 against Liverpool off the ball today, which is certainly something they didn't do when they went to Chelsea. So maybe Hertz has learned that he can't really use his game model against these top sides because they are just going to hurt them, which means that Salah's prospects definitely decline if they're going to shore up. But overall, I still think Brighton will have enough Hertz and enough Brighton within them that even if they are to play 6-3-1, you could definitely hurt them on transition and there'll still be space. And in general, they're not used to playing a 6-3-1. And it is actually a little bit more exploitable than what I would say a 5-4-1 is. For a variety of reasons, especially against Liverpool, with how good Salah is in both wide areas and in the half spaces, and in general, because of the pressure they're able to sustain through a passing network where the distances are small, and you've obviously got Trent, which is a creative phenomenon. So, and the angles he can provide from, or the variety of angles he can provide in crosses, etc., etc. Right? So, I'm still comfortable, even if I know that, well, relatively comfortable if I know Brighton employ the 6-3-1, and therefore, for that reason, given I think Salah could have more instances than he's used to, and he's been so ruthless and efficient, on top of the fact that there's so many unknowns with Haaland in terms of the fact that there is no creative. Savinho's injured. So how do they function now? How does he function now? And historically, going to Bournemouth is not somewhere where you score a lot of goals. I've given it to Salah at the moment. Like I said, subject to change. Probably won't, but I just got a bit of a gut feeling about Haaland. I will check in with myself and I would just go over things again before solving your problems. You would definitely have an update. But for now, that is where the captaincy lands. And that is all she wrote. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope, and that is all she wrote. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got some value out of it. Please do let me know if you have any questions. Stick them in the comments. Again, thank you so much for 4,000 subscribers. Let's push to 5,000 and get the first big feat, since I think a lot of you guys have joined, because we hit 1,000 subs quite early. But I guess this would be the big feat that we can all celebrate together. Have a magnificent day. I shall see you for solving your problems very shortly. And that's about it.